Hello, everyone, and hope that you guys are all doing well. Right now in this session, I'm going to record my responses for the questions I had about channel management, especially about the concept of channel design and channel management. So, essentially, channel management is something that's going to be extremely critical as part of the sales strategy. And with this, we're pretty much coming to the end of all the content that I wanted to bring in for this class in terms of sales strategy. So, in the ideal situation where if things had gone to plan, this would have been my last session, after which we would have done the simulation game. So, I am thinking about ways by which I can get your engagement, but bring content but without necessarily a game. So just give me some time to think about that. But in the meantime, here is what we have on channel management. So this is something that you're aware of, right? So essentially, the channel is a way by which you actually bring your products and your solutions to the market. So the other term for that is, of course, go-to-market strategies. So you have multiple channels or multiple ways by which you can actually go into the market. And as you can see out here, hopefully you're able to see my cursor. What you're actually seeing is that if you are the manufacturer or the supplier, you have multiple ways by which you can reach your customers. So you can decide to go with option number one. You might say, well, you know what? I'm going to go with a distributor or a wholesaler. So that is a channel. The distributor or the wholesaler in turn might go with the retailer, who in turn will be the point where the end customer comes and interacts with and then gets the products from. Now, in some situations, you might also decide to work with an agent or a broker. An agent or a broker is particularly used when the job they perform is very close to a distributor or wholesaler. The only difference for an agent or a broker is that they might not physically carry your products. So they will not have any inventory. So they will not be carrying anything. So essentially, that might be the slight difference. And the agent or broker is particularly used when you're dealing with services or when you're entering new markets and you do not want to invest in warehouses or stuff like that. You just want to make sure that you find somebody out there who goes and gets the business, and then you fulfill the orders from your local base. So again, the agent or the broker in turn might reach the retailer, and this is one way of reaching the end customer. Now, in some cases, you can actually go directly to the retailer, and then you can go to the end customer. And the fourth option, and this is also an option where you might say, hey, I am the manufacturer. I'm going to have my own sales organization. I'm going to have my own distribution center. And it could be that I have my own e-commerce website. So all of these together might be used to reach the end customer. So when I asked you to try and take a look at what is channel design, your decision to say, am I going to go with option one, option two, option three, or option four is what channel design is about. So if you notice here, we talk about channel design, and here the choices you have to make is, do I go with option four, that is direct, or any of the options one, two, three are indirect because you are not directly connecting with your customer. Right? Now, what you need to understand, of course, is that if you're going to go with your own sales organization, you're going to have a lot of costs associated with it, and every cost that you have will have an impact on how much profit I can make from it. So the more costs you have, the less profit you would make. But on the other hand, if you work with distributors and dealers, maybe you don't have to pay the sales force, but maybe you have to pay them a commission for actually having to go sell your products as well. So essentially, you have to ask yourself, which is the best possible way, and where can I keep in consideration what costs I have to spend to get my products to the customers. And maybe in some cases, especially when you think about companies like Procter and Gamble, which use Walmart, it might actually make more sense and cheaper for Procter and Gamble to have retailers selling it to the end customer, that is you, rather than actually Procter and Gamble coming to each one of your homes and trying to sell it. That would make it too prohibitively expensive. So you have to understand there are costs and margins associated with everything. And then, of course, based on that, you have to then make a decision whether you're going to go, if you decide to go with a third party, then you have to go with, hey, which of these options is the best? One, two, or three? It could be that you could go one and two and three, depending upon how big your market is. But once I decide what it is, once I say, well, you know what? It does not make sense for me to go direct because my own salespeople are too expensive. Then the next option is, okay, you've chosen one, two, and three over four. Now, between one, two, and three, you have to decide how many levels should exist between you and the end customer. The idea being that the more number of levels between you and the end customer, the farther removed you are from the customer, and it makes it harder for you to always understand what's happening with the customer. And the last one also you need to take into consideration is, do you want selective or intensive coverage? Again, selective coverage is when you do not want to be available everywhere. You want to be available only in certain spots, as against where you want to be available everywhere at the same time when you launch a particular new product. So again, depending upon what it is that you want, you will choose what is the option between 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I know companies out there which actually use 1, 2, 3, and 4, where they would say 4 is used for really my top of the top customers, and I use 1, 2, 3 for some of the other bottom tier customers. Right? Remember, so your own sales and distribution could be used for your enterprise customers if you go back to your notes, and then your 1, 2, and 3 would be used for some of your transactional and functional customers as well. Now, if you decide to actually go and use again, if you decide to go with options 1, 2, 3, and 4, what you can actually do is you can actually start saying, okay, what are the ways by which I'm going to manage this? It's not just enough for you to decide how are we going to go with all these. You also have to decide, once I have them, how do I manage them? Just like if you have your own salespeople, you have to manage your salespeople. Having distributors or channel partners also means that you actually have to also manage them. So which means that you have to decide, if you're going to appoint them, what kind of policies and contracts are you going to have with them? What are you going to have as an agreement in terms of what do you expect them to do in terms of what they're doing for performance? And what is always going to happen is that anytime you work with an outside agent who is not part of your own organization, you're always going to have conflict. And you have to make sure that you have to manage that conflict with the main idea that your end customer does not suffer because you are busy trying to fight it out with your different channel partners. So again, this is something that you really need to understand. That's channel management. So when you try and take a look at it, part of the sales strategy is understanding what is my go-to-market. But once I go with the go-to-market, I have to understand that go-to-market is not so simple. You have to first of all decide what kind of design and how do I go about dealing with it, right? So essentially, that's what we have here. Right? So again, what will decide on top of all the things I said? What will decide your whole go-to-market strategy? So of course, as we said, we have to understand the demand chain requirements, right? So again, the channel strategy is the decision to say, how am I going to decide my channel design and my channel management? So we have to first of all understand, what do my customers want and what do my customers' customer want? So when you take a look at the demand chain requirements, if I go back to my previous slide, the demand chain requirements essentially talks about, hey, what are the demands of my retailer and what are the demands of my end customer? Or in the case of scenario 2, what are the demands of my agent? What are the needs of my retailer or the demands of my retailer? And then what are the demands of my customer or the needs of my customer? Or in the case of option 1, what are the demands of my distributor? What are the demands of my retailer? And what are the demands of my end customer? Always understand that in all of these cases, 1, 2, and 3, that the needs of the retailer or the agent or the distributor might not be the same as the needs of the end customer. So you have to take that effort and try to see, how am I going to try and understand those needs? And that's what we refer to as a demand chain. That is, if you choose any of the options, that is for every step in the design. So if it is going to be you, then you're going to have a channel partner, then you're going to have a retailer, and then you're going to go to a customer. Then you have to understand the needs of the channel partner, the needs of the retailer, and the needs of the end customer. Because once you understand that, then you start asking yourself, to fulfill those needs, what kind of skills and capabilities do I want? So for example, I remember I talking about this in class when we talked about a car dealership, is when you think about a car dealer, you have an automobile manufacturer, then you have a dealer, and then you have the customer, right? But the needs of the customer are not just buying a product, but also getting the car and serviced. So essentially what that means is that your dealer then has to have a space. They should have a workshop. They should be investing in personnel. They should be investing in inventory of different spare parts and tires and oils and stuff like that. So that is all going to be a cost to the channel partner. And if the channel partner needs to make money, they would turn to you and say, well, what commission or what is it that I'm going to get over and beyond all the money that they're spending to take care of your customer? So what you need to understand is the more demanding the requirements of the end customer, the more capabilities you'll be expecting from your channel partners. Now, again, you have to also understand is that, yes, these two things are extremely critical to decide how am I going to go to market, but you should also understand when I'm doing all this, what is my competition doing? So for example, one of the companies that we work a lot with at school is a company called Hilti, where Hilti predominantly main decision, if you go back to this, Hilti only works with option 4. They work with their own sales and distribution center. But when you take a look at flexible, when you took the case flexible, when you think about all some of the other companies, when you saw the presentation from Fastenal, all of those are the options taken by your competition of Hilti. So essentially what you need to understand is that one of the reasons why Hilti is not the cheapest player is because they have to pay for their own salespeople and their own channels. And so as a result, they better have a good value proposition, because if the competition is going through distribution, maybe they are not as expensive as Hilti. So you need to understand what the competition is doing, and that will affect your channel strategy. And the last but not the least is channel power. So think about this. I've said this in class before. If you think about Walmart and Procter and Gamble, I think Procter and Gamble is an $80 billion company. Walmart is $400 billion. So you would think that Walmart is much more powerful than Procter and Gamble. But what you'll see is that if Procter and Gamble pulls its products from Walmart shelves, you're going to have a lot of people deciding not to buy from Walmart, because the reason they go to Walmart is they buy all the Procter and Gamble products and then they could go buy the other products. So it could be that it's just not your revenues that is going to decide, but it also depends upon who has power in that relationship between your channel partner and yourself. And those are all the things that are going to drive your channel strategy. And of course, all of these are then taken care of, and you'll always have various factors like what's happening with technology. Technology makes a lot of things more visible. Technology might collapse where you could say, well, you know what, I'm not going to work with channel partner, I'm going to completely go with e-commerce, and you have an issue. Trade practices, for example, when you had the guy from the cigarette, from the tobacco company, from RJT, what you see is that there in RJT, the trade practice is that you cannot go sell direct, you have to work with distributors. So again, or wholesalers, so which means that your trade is going to dictate how you're actually going to go to market. Regulatory framework, again, if you go back to RJT or pharmaceutical sales, you have to understand what the regulation says in terms of how you can approach the market. There are also things like what's happening in the economy. And again, that is the last two videos that you saw are all about how should salespeople adapt according to industry trends, especially in terms of economy right now. These are things that you need to keep in mind. And of course, how are my customers changing? And I think this is interesting because if because of COVID, a lot of companies decide to buy more and more products and solutions online, then you have this issue that, hey, wait a minute, maybe I will have to deal with the fact that moving forward, I don't need to have a channel partner because all the customers will buy online. Again, these are things that you need to keep in mind when you're thinking about your channel strategy. Again, that all these factors will first of all drive your channel design decision. And once you decide between options 1, 2, 3, and or 4, then you need to come up with policies to manage your channel management, right? And I'm going to skip this slide, and essentially I'm going to move to what we designed by channel design and management. And essentially what we're talking about here is that if I decide to go with options 1, 2, 3, and 4, I'm going to be talking about things like how do I choose my partner? How do I make sure that is one partner going to be more important to me than the other? So how do I classify my partners into A, B, C kind of partners? Then How do I onboard? That is, how do I introduce my partner into what we sell? And how do I make sure that they know exactly and they have the right kind of training and skill sets necessary to go represent us to the market out there? How do I develop business plans? So how do I make sure that I tell the partners what do I expect from them? So how much sales should they make? What capabilities should they have? What are the activities that they should be doing? How many salespeople should they be having? And all of these are part of your partner business plan, which is then used at one point in time to set targets. And then later on, it also begins part of your partner evaluation, where then what do? You go back and then you evaluate the partner based on what was agreed upon in the business plan. Now, one of the things that you then need to realize is that when you have a partner business plan, it is like you telling the channel partner saying you're expected to do this, this, and this for us. You're supposed to have so many salespeople. You're supposed to have so many technicians. You're supposed to run so many marketing campaigns. You're supposed to have so much inventory. That is, you should carry so much of us. But hey, we will also help you do this. So you should also come up with, how am I going to support these partners? And that is something that you have to keep in mind. And when we talk about partner support programs, I am sorry I skipped one slide, but this is what we mean by a partner support program. So it should have come a little bit later on in the slide deck. I apologize, but this is what a partner support program is. So essentially what you have is, at the center, you're going to tell your channel partners that you're going to make sure that they make enough money, that you're going to give them a good quality product so that it is easy for them to sell to the customers, that you're going to give them a good price. You're going to make sure that there's going to be enough stock available so that when the customers come to the channel partner, that they don't have to wait. And you have a good reputation, because if you as a supplier have a good reputation, it is easier for your channel partner to sell. Because if you have a good brand recognition, customers will automatically come. It's easy for you to sell. Right? And then, of course, on top of that, depending upon how important the channel partner is, then you can start thinking about some of the other things like, hey, can we provide them with more marketing and promotional support, that is advertising support? Can we give them more training? Can we give them technical assistance? So if they have to go sell to the customer and the customer is asking difficult questions, can we send our own people to go with them? Market research. So essentially, can we share what is happening in the market with our channel partners so that they can be very good in what they can do? And the last is company policy. So for example, hey, with this particular channel partner who's doing a lot of business, how much discounts will I give? Will I give them more discounts? Will I give them less discounts? Will I give them special payment terms? So if they are a new channel partner, then you say you have to pay within 30 days. But if the channel partner is very well trusted, well reputed, you could say you can pay in 60 days. So those are special company policies that you could have as well. Again, going back, these are all the steps in channel design and management. And this is an example that I wanted to share with you. This is a real life example of one of my students who did a project for actually an Indiana-based company, but this was based in Europe, the European subsidiary. But this is the channel management process and toolkit created for one of the business units of Cummins. Most of you might have heard of Cummins, which is based in Columbus, not Columbus, Ohio, but Columbus, Indiana. And essentially what you see here is that you see that all the things that we need to be doing that we had here, right? We had partner selection, partner classification. You'll see all of that come in here. So the first thing you have to do is that you have to create a tool for how do I select my distributors? How do I make sure that when I have to onboard the distributors, how do I come up with my checklist? Then I need to have my business plan to say, what am I expecting from my distributor? How do I classify my distributors into A, B, C, or D kind of distributor? Then what kind of policies and pricing and marketing support am I going to provide them? And how am I going to reward them? So these are all the tools that you need to have. But there is a process towards how you deal with this. So when you decide on your channel design and channel selection, you start with saying, again, these are Cummins specific terms, so you don't need to know it. But again, the first thing you notice is that, is there a growth opportunity in the market? Can that growth opportunity, does it necessitate us to have a new distributor? And if we need a new distributor, are we going to hunt for those distributors, or are we going to take an existing distributor and then use them to actually sell and take care of this new opportunity. If I am going to go with a new distributor, then I need to have a pool of distributors. And then I need to make sure that for this pool of distributors, I need to have selection criteria, right? And then I decide whether if they meet the criteria, then you appoint them. If you don't, you go back to the pool. And this is just like a distributor, but it could also be about how you guys are going to get selected for the company that you're going to work with. The company you're going to work with is going to say, hey, is there a market opportunity? Do we need new salespeople? Or are we going to get our existing salespeople to do the same? If we need new salespeople, we need a pool. So we're going to go to Ball State. We're going to talk to a lot of the sales students there. But then we have our own criteria to see what we look for. And then based on this, we decide if you're going to appoint them, yes or no. If I appoint them, then I need to onboard the salespeople, just like you need to onboard your new distributors. And once you onboard them, you tell them what your strategy is, right? And you go with what your strategy is, that's your distributor strategy. And then you start discussing what is my business plan. So imagine if you're in sales, you end up in sales, then they're going to tell you what are they going to expect from you in terms of what are you expected to do, right? But then of course, they're going to then classify you into, are you a key account? Are you going to an SDR, BDR? Similarly, different partners are going to have different capabilities. So you need to classify them. Then of course, you need to provide them with the training. Then you go with evaluating the distributors. So you provide them with a toolkit, and then you do the performance evaluation. Now, these were all things that you have at the top that was already created within Cummins. So essentially, they had a distributor profiling tool if they had to choose from existing customers. So they had to create new tools if they wanted to select new ones. But if they had an existing one, they want to try and see how can we choose the existing ones. But of course, there's going to be some similarity between here and here, right? Then of course, once you start training, then you need to have training package both for your salespeople as well as for your distributors. Right? When you manage a distributor, it has to go into your CRM, customer relationship management system, so that you can keep track of what your distributors are doing. But then of course, when you do the evaluation, you have a distributor scorecard, or if you're going to be in sales, they're going to do an evaluation of you and it goes into the HR scorecard. Then of course, if my distributor performs well, then you need to reward them. And if they are not performing well, you need to let them go. And once you let them go, you again go back and see, is there a growth opportunity? Then we need to go back through the whole process. So this is the whole channel management process. And this is just an example. So these were all the typical kind of tools that this company came up with to try and make sure that they manage the distributor. So essentially, example of how do I select, business plan, how do I classify my distributors, how do I profile, and then how do I look at the scorecard. So here's just some screenshots. So for example, if I want to select a distributor, what kind of criteria do I want to look for, right? So essentially, this is something that they do, and then they see, okay, between the 4 options, which is the best possible option. In this, the idea being that the higher the score at the bottom, the better suited that distributor is for you to work with them. Of course, then you do this, you classify them into platinum, gold, silver, and authorized, with the idea being that the platinum is the one that gets the most support from you. So think of this as your enterprise distributors, your consultative distributors, your functional distributors, and your transactional distributors. So just like we have ABCD customers as a company, you can even within your distributors, you can break them down into these 4. The idea being that you support each one of them differently. Once I do this, this is an example of how they try to do the profiling, and then they say, are you doing well or not? And then of course they build a business plan. So essentially what they say is, okay, what kind of customers are you going to bring in? That's your target accounts. What is going to be your objective in terms of sales, in terms of support? Then they start measuring whether what you did in the previous time period, was it red is you're not doing well, Y is there is room for improvement, and then G is green is you're doing great. So essentially they try to map your performance. They will have a date. They'll see how much business you're bringing. And then as a salesperson who manages a team, you actually go about looking at the comments here. And of course, you do this for every distributor. And this form then goes into your CRM system. And based on this, you will come in and see how did they perform. So you'll say, okay, we wanted our distributors to have a good customer focus. How did they score? So in this case, for example, you would see that the best performing distributors in terms of taking care of the customers was distributor 11, 12, and 15. But if you're also trying to take a look at, hey, are they investing in capabilities? You'll see that distributor 11 is doing well, right? So essentially what you see is that, so what you'll see is over a period of time, you'll see that like a distributor 11 is one of those people who actually do a very good job overall in making sure that they're developing their capabilities. They have a good customer focus. They have a good internal process, which means that they need to be rewarded for what they're doing. And you use the scorecard to try and go back to this model and say, well, we need to make sure we chose the right distribution. We're going to have the right business plan. We're going to provide them with the right classification, and then we're going to make sure that we take care of them. So again, this is in a nutshell what goes on in terms of channel design and channel management as well. So again, as I said earlier, I'm going to be rethinking the way how we'll be looking at doing something instead of the game. But please bear with me till next Monday or Tuesday when I'll actually have that as well. I also apologize that I've not had the time to grade your exam because the exams are stuck in the office and I need to get special permission to go into the office and get it. So I'll probably get it and have it to you next week. My apologies for that. Anyway, stay safe and take care.